Great, okay, fantastic. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. As Sarah said, my name is Peter Baddeley, and today's webinar is going to be about resource allocation and equipment reservation made simple and quick using Quizcom Forms. I'm going to start with a few slides just to go through, set the scene a little bit, then we'll have some demos, and then we'll have a few slides to finish as well. So just a quick brief summary of the Quizcom Form app. So it's a SharePoint hosted app. That's important because it means that the data never leaves your tenant. So you've already invested in the Microsoft 365 platform and you don't necessarily want to have data stored in other cloud services somewhere, in a different data region, because some of this information can be quite sensitive to you potentially. So very important that the data never leaves your tenant. Secondly, those of you who have maybe used Quizcom Forms previously or seen some of our previous webinars, we'll be looking at the modern forms today. So that's leveraging the new Microsoft Fluent design system. It's fully responsive for both desktop and mobile and works with modern SharePoint, although you can also work with classic SharePoint sites as well. Today, we're going to talk more about advanced forms. So some of our other webinars, we've focused on how easy it is to build out forms, and I'll show a little bit of that today. Simple things like easily doing form layouts, doing things like multiple rows, default values, etc. But I'm also going to sort of talk on some of the more advanced concepts, so things like connected documents, multi-page forms, converting forms to PDF, workflow. All of those options are available to us, and all of those options are quite easy to configure for end users. I'm also going to focus on how we can extend those forms a little bit more, so how we can cope for some slightly more complicated scenarios, implement logic onto our forms to maybe deal with certain validation scenarios, pulling through data from different lookup lists, selecting a field and pulling through multiple values, even images. We're going to look at customizing some of the buttons, setting fields to read only. And this functionality also can be used to do things like pull data through from the user profile service or to implement sort of wizard-based survey interfaces. And I'll show a little bit about how an end user actually can very simply leverage sample scripts. But also as a developer, certainly I'm not a developer, but I'll talk a little bit about the opportunity for developers about how they can then add that additional logic and provide that additional logic to their end users to then enhance those form solutions a little bit more. The key thing is, and we'll be talking a little bit later about Quizcom Forms versus Power Apps and other solutions on the market. But the key thing is this is really easy to install. So this is just an app, and once it's enabled, we can enable different components of the app, and you can either use the full suite as part of the Enterprise Edition or individual components, and we're going to be focusing on a few of those today. Now, the demo today, we're going to look at sort of resource booking scenarios. So we're going to be looking at booking of courses, so someone choosing to look at a catalogue of courses and then register for a course, and also requesting a piece of equipment. In this case, it's going to be more sort of hardware-orientated equipment, tools, cleaners, but that could be an IT piece of equipment, a car, or some other sort of booking you're doing. And obviously, this is just a scenario today to show you the example of how you can work with Quizcom Forms. Any scenario which you've worked with in SharePoint in the past, whether that be with pure SharePoint, InfoPath, Power Apps as well, is available to deliver via the Quizcom Form solutions. We've done solutions for expenses forms, mileage, HR, holiday requests, CapEx spending type form processes, help desk ticketing, and many more solutions. So we're just going to take some simple examples today and show you how we can extend SharePoint Forms. So I'm going to step out of PowerPoint and I'm going to move across to SharePoint. And the first example I'm going to take today is course registrations. I've just got a SharePoint site. I'm working in Office 365 for the demos today. And in this site, I've got a couple of really simple lists, which I'm going to then, and I've extended with Quizcom Forms. So I've got a list which has got all my course topics on. So it's got a few course topics. I've got a list for my courses. And against my courses, I'm storing a number of fields of information, including the topic, start date, total seats, number of available seats, and also some details about the course itself. I've also got a couple of views. So I've got a view which shows me all courses. And then I've got a view which shows me those which are available. So you'll notice one of those courses is not there, which is the SharePoint development one, because it started yesterday. So I'm only interested in available courses, and I'll show you how we work with that in a minute. And then finally, I've got a course registrations list. So this is where people can come in and register for a specific course. And you see I've registered for one already. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to click new. And I'm going to start by just showing you the results. So this is a SharePoint list, this is a SharePoint form, but we've used Quizcom Forms to customize it. So you immediately notice it's a little bit different. The layout is different. I've got fields structured across my page. I've got some options for drop downs. I've got some tabs up here as well. But it looks like SharePoint, it feels like SharePoint. So firstly, what I'm going to do is I can select a topic. So I've got some available topics for me. It's a filter here. So I could go, I'm interested in web development, and then I'll be presented with a few courses. I don't have to have this filter on, and I can see all courses. Note I don't see that SharePoint development course because it's filtered out because it's not available, and we'll have a look at that again in a second. So I can select a specific course, and this will then pull me through some details from the course. So because we've got other fields of information in our courses list, we're pulling that through onto the form. So I can see it. It's not a singular drop-down field. I can see other relevant information. Maybe in this case it's a course, so I'm going to show you a piece of equipment later. It could be a product catalogue, which we're having a look through. It could be property details. We can pull through all sorts of information. And then I've also got a custom button here, so I can come in and register for that course. I'm going to do that, and then it's going to create a registration for me there. And we could trigger a number of things from that registration, such as emails. We could go and update list items, all sorts of things using the workflow component called custom actions within Quizcom Forms. And again, we'll have a little look at that in a second. Now you notice that I clicked on the little menu option there for Quizcom Apps. And this will show me the different apps I've got available to work with on this specific site. And this is how, as an end user, non-technical, I can very easily configure certain settings around this form. So, for example, I can configure the form layout. I can define a number of tabs available to me. I can lay out those fields on the form. I can adjust their width. I can add additional rows and go and select further columns to show within my form. I can add additional tabs. In this case, I've got the course outline tab, and I can even define criteria for when it should show that additional tab. So taking people through a journey, showing tabs to only certain users at certain points, maybe in a help desk ticket. But I can do more here very easily. So I can define not only the layout, but behavior of certain fields on my form. So for example, I can set default values. So in this case, I'm setting the value of registered user to me. So we support using fields such as me and today. as well as data from the actual field which has been completed. We can also work with lookups and extend that lookup functionality using cascading lookups. And we'll look at one example here, and I'll look at another example with my other form scenario today. So I can select a specific column, in this case course. I can define the site, so I can do lookups across sites if I want to. I can define my target list and my target column. I can filter based on a view, so in this case restricting my lookup to only available items. I don't want to show all of the items to choose from. And I can filter based on a column, so that idea of filtering based on topic. So lots of options to provide more advanced behavior around lookups, which is not native to SharePoint and we would have to code. We can do other things like create tables of child items, order items, expenses items, using the repeating row functionality as well. We can also extend our form with scripts. And if I just come in here and look at my form, we can see where that capability is very easily accessible. And this is a good example of also where Quizcom Build provide you with pre-built scripts, which you can use and modify and enhance. And then as a developer, you can extend further if you need to. And we can access that here on the menu. And we get a few different options. We get access to that same configuration menu. We can define styles. So if we want to have some CSS to control the formatting, we can do that. And we also have the script editor where I can input certain scripts. And I'll go through this a little bit more detail in the next example. But I just wanted to call out that this is all designed to help you. As an end user, I have some easy to use pre-built examples for me. So I can set fields to be read-only. I can change the save button caption. I can do simple calculations. I can change different form states, as well as dealing with that sort of wizard survey mode, which I talked about as well. But as a developer, I've got resources available for me to actually guide me through how I can build out more complex scripting myself. So lots of opportunities targeted at all sorts of different user bases here, and much easier to work with than, for instance, tools like Power Apps. Finally, I want to talk briefly about the workflow component. So most of you will probably be aware that SharePoint 2010 workflows were retired back in November, and that's left certain gaps for delivering simple workflows. Sure, you might be able to deliver them with SharePoint 2013 workflows or Power Automate, but they're not always easy to do, certainly not easily accessible to end users. And that's where the activities and custom actions come into play with Quizcom Forms. So in here, what I can do is I can define some activities. So think of them a bit like reusable workflow steps. And you can come in here and you can define these steps. And for each step, you can do a number of different things. So in this case, I'm getting a column value. I'm getting it from a current site, and I'm getting it from the courses list. So I can come in here and I can say, well, I want to go and get a field value. Now I can just have that field value, but I'm actually just using some parameters here. So it's very easy for me to then dynamically set them within my workflow. And then I'm going to update that value. So I'm getting the current value, and then I'm going to update that value. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to then say, I'm actually then going to go and update the available seats with a parameter I provide. So at this point, these are just workflow activities for me to use. And then I pull them together in something called custom actions. And what I'm trying to achieve here is as I'm booked or someone is booked on that course, I want to take down that available seats by one. It's a simple workflow activity to go and get the current value, take one off it, and then go and set the new value. And we build that together in our custom action, which combines one or more activities. We can run custom actions in different scenarios, so we can run them on a state of a specific item, add, update, or we can provide them as manual actions for someone to run. We can define conditions that the action runs under. And then finally, we then say, well, what happens? So our first action goes and gets the value of the available seats. So we go and get that current value. So it's where it equals to the course ID. And we can actually go and set that in. So we're saying, well, it's the current item running the course. And then here we define, well, what happens on the update. So we say, we're getting it based on the course. And then what are we setting that? So we're setting that as our output value. So previously, we got here the value of the available seats. And now we're setting a new seats value, taking one away from it. So just reducing that number of seats. Quite a simple workflow step. I haven't had to open SharePoint Designer, Power Apps, some other workflow tool to do that. Done all directly within the browser. And what has that done? Well, in my courses list, previously for my course which I just booked, I had 18 available seats, and now I've got 17 available seats. So a simple update of a list item, simply and easily achieved without having to write or work with a complex workflow tool. So we're now going to move on and have a look at an equipment reservation solution. So how we can reserve equipment. Similar scenario to what we were doing with courses, but just some slightly different functionality. And we're going to build some of this as we go. So here I am on my equipment reservation site. And you should see I've got a few lists again. I've got a categories list, so similar to my topics. Well, I've got some categories of equipment. Secondly, I've got the equipment itself. So these are things which someone wants to reserve. And you can see I've got a number of different items. They're categorized using that category. I'm storing an image, and I've got a description for those pieces of equipment. Finally, I've got the equipment reservation list itself. So this is where I can come in and book a piece of equipment. Now, I've already done some work in the customization of this list, so we'll start with that, and then we'll look at how that's going to be extended. So you see already that I've done some layout around my form, and I've got some dates. I've got the ability to select a category, and that will then select pieces of equipment. But I haven't got all the logic implemented on my form, so we'll have a look at that in a second. So firstly, I'm going to go and look at the form layout I've implemented and also the cascading lookup. So let's look at that first. Similar to what we're doing previously, but this was an interdependent lookup. So we've defined a column. We've actually got two columns here. Simple one for equipment, which just looks at my categories list itself. And then secondly, the one to select a specific piece of equipment. And notice here how I'm filtering it based on the category selected. So based on the category in my course registration, and then it's looking at the lookup list, sorry, in the equipment reservation, and it's looking at the equipment list and matching the appropriate categories. So if I choose chainsaws, it will only show me the chainsaws available. Secondly, I've just done some simple layout, including the start date, end date, category, equipment. And I'm also defined fields for description and image, which I'm going to come to in a minute, and that's how I'm going to pull through that other information from my equipments list. Okay, so that's a little bit of the setup of my list. Now I'm going to add the logic to my form itself. So let's go in here and look at my scripts. To start with, I'm just going to use some of the samples made available to me. So firstly, I'm going to go and get some additional columns from my lookup. And notice I can do that for just a singular field, or I can also get that in the repeating rows, the sort of child item, order items, expense items scenario as well. I notice this pulls in a script. Now, in first instance, this looks quite scary. I'm like, oof, I'm not a developer. I'm not really sure how to modify that. But actually, all of the scripts are the same. They always have some variables to manage. And even someone like me can cope with those. So I can say, well, what's the name of my lookup field? So in this case, in my current form, the value of my lookup field is called equipment. What's next do I need to do? Well, I need to define the fields to get. So the fields to get from my target lookup list. Well, I know I want description. If I could spell it correctly, description. I know I want image, so I'll take that one. And I might actually add another one here. So I know I would like the title as well. It's pretty easy for me to come in and modify those additional fields I want. And for simplicity, I'm actually going to use the same options here. So I'm just going to paste them in here. And in this case, it's just saying what were the field values on the form to set. So if these were different, if on my form it was called picture, I could define that as picture. And then the logic would work. So this is a pre-built example. Quizcom have built this up for us. Let's add a bit more. So what else would we like to do here? Well, we'd like to set those fields to be read-only on the form. We don't want people to be able to change those values. So again, we'll go and look for a specific sample, and we'll look for set field to appear read-only. Fantastic. And again, it works very much the same. So we come down here, we look for our variables to set. What are the fields to disable? Nice and simple. So I can come in here and I can go description. Again, I need to learn how to spell description. And finally, we want to set the image to be read-only. Now my next script's a little bit more complicated, so I've got it saved off here in Notepad, so let me just copy that in. So I've got one of my developers to build me the script here to pull through all of the additional logic which I want. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to be pulling through the fact that a certain field is those additional fields from my lookup list and setting whether a field is read-only, but I want to do more. I want to make sure that when people look up a specific piece of equipment, it knows whether it's available or not. It knows it's available based on existing bookings. And this is where I'm adding my slightly more complex script here. So I'm saying, well, actually, if someone's booked that chainsaw, I want it grayed out within the script. So I'm just going to add that script in. And again, I'll just show you the where I can easily define those variables. So let's just move up to the top of my script. And again, what am I doing here? So what is my destination list? Equipment reservations. What is the start date of the range? So when's the start of the period I'm looking at? So if someone's booked a piece of equipment from yesterday to today, and I try and book that same piece of equipment for today and tomorrow, I don't want it available. Or if it's booked out this whole week, I shouldn't be able to book it just for one day that week. And the same applies to end date. What's the lookup field? Equipment, yeah? What's the category field? Category. So defined nice and simply for me as a user implementing this form, I can configure this script because I may well have different field names. I'm also working with internal field names which might be slightly different. So I'm going to save all these scripts. Now I might need to refresh my page. Let's wait for it to reload. Okay, so let's just check that those scripts we applied have worked as expected. So for instance, if I come in here and I book a piece of equipment from today until Thursday, and if I come in here and select carpet cleaners, you'll notice that they're grayed out, and that's because they're not available. If we switch over to chainsaws, we'll see that the gas chainsaw is not available, but the other items are. And what that's actually doing is that's not looking at a different list, it's actually looking at the details of the equipment reservation list. So we can see here that I've got a number of bookings. The carpet cleaner's booked out today, so I can't book it out today and tomorrow. Equally, this piece of equipment was booked out yesterday and today, hence why I can't book it for today and tomorrow. If I come back and I changed my dates, I would have different availabilities, and that's the power of the scripts. So for instance, if I book it from tomorrow until Thursday, you'll notice my carpet cleaners are available now. And if I select one, look how it's also pulling through that description and the image. Really useful for me to see details. Maybe if this was a product example, I would see that product displayed. And again, that changes for the different products I'm selecting. So I now move on and look at how we can add workflow to this solution. So in this case, we want someone to get notified of a action when someone makes a booking. So we can come in here, and I've already defined part of it, and we'll look at the rest of it. So I've defined my activity, and I've got an email activity. And on there, I've defined a few variables. So I'm defining the requester. I've got some just generic subject. And I'm also defining some variables for my equipment, my start date, and my end date. And I can pull that together into a custom action. And I do that by doing a new action. And I could do this based on various triggers, but we'll base it just on automatic action. Remember, we can define conditions. And then we can say that might run under a certain condition, and then we can define certain activities. So we can define an equipment booking confirmation. So we're using one of our standard activities. And we're doing a few things here. So we're sending an email to the requester, and we can insert tokens, and we can look at certain properties. So who created the item? We can look at certain other properties about the list, or custom columns we've included. So for example, the equipment value, the start date, and the end date as well. And what this will then do is whenever an email notification or whenever a record is submitted, it will then send an email notification to the requester, in this case the created by, to then say, here is the details of your booking. So it will allow you to easily notify people. It might be that you have a central reservations person which you want to be able to go and make and look at any of the bookings as well. So just some examples of what you can do. Let's return to our slides, and I just want to talk through a few of the examples which we've looked at today. So firstly, we can dynamically show and hide fields. And what we're comparing here is Power Apps versus Quizcom Forms. I like Power Apps. It's quite good for building simple mobile forms, but as a forms customization tool for SharePoint, it's often overly complicated. And so the first example of where I think that's the case is just dynamically showing and hiding fields. In Quizcom Forms, it's just a simple function. In Power Apps, it's a complex formula I need to build. Cascading lookups is even worse. I need to be a full-on developer to be able to build something like that. In Quizcom Forms, it's some simple fields and options which I can define. Setting default values. In Power Apps, again, a complex formula. In Quizcom Forms, a simple rule to define. Form layouts can be a complex, restrictive grid in Power Apps. In Quizcom Forms, a lot more flexible, easily to design in within the browser. So just to wrap up, Quizcom Forms is flexible for all scenarios. It's easy to build forms on modern SharePoint, which are responsive and look like SharePoint. The data is stored within SharePoint. It's got a flexible workflow platform, which acts as a good substitute for the SharePoint 2010 workflows we often rely on. And it's a far easier solution to work with than perhaps Power Automate. There are pre-built custom scripts, easy for the end user to work with, and it's in a solution which is extendable for developers as well. With that, I'd thank you for your time, and let's see if we've got any questions.